This is the day that I decide whether I'm keeping the Fujifilm X100V or if I'm giving it back. If you're about to buy this camera, please watch this video first, because what I'm about to say could save you a ton of wonga. Now, I had extremely high hopes for this, but when it arrived, I was a little bit disappointed. It's not what I expected at all, and that's largely down to the hype surrounding this camera on the internet. So in this video, I'm going to tell you who this camera is really for, what I was expecting because of what everybody's talking about, what it's actually like and what nobody is telling you. I'll also show you the image quality and explain my overall experience with it so far. Now, Danny Boy also bought one of these cameras, so we headed out to Knott's to give it one more chance. And if I still don't like it, it's going back. So make sure to watch the whole video to find out what I decide. Let's go and test it, shall we? Ready? He's ready. Firstly, I think it's important to explain exactly why I chose this camera and what I expected of it, because I think it's going to be the same for a lot of people. I love the image that you get from a film camera. It's kind of what I base all of my video color grading on. I love the imperfections, the grain, the artifacts that you get, and the fact that it's not super sharp like a digital camera. And apparently the Fuji X100V is the digital camera that's going to get you the closest to a film camera. Well, we'll see. Most people will say if you want the film look, you've got to go for a film camera. But the thing is with me, I'm way too impatient for that, and I don't want to spend loads of money on rolls of film all the time. And also, I'm just not good enough at photography yet to be able to manage one of these cameras. I'm much better being able to take a photo and be able to delete it and start again without worrying how many rolls I've got left. I don't want to have to edit the photos. Yes, you can shoot Jpeg in any digital camera, but the Fuji ones are widely known for having a really nice looking Jpeg image without having to edit the photos. I wanted something compact, so I didn't have to take my larger camera with me. I also don't have to think about lens choice because this has a fixed lens. Therefore, I'm going to have to be more intentional with where I stand and how I compose and frame each shot before taking a picture. And that's going to in turn make me a better photographer because I'm going to have to slow down and think about all these things. And if I'm not going to edit the photos, it means I'm going to have to nail my exposure and white balance every time. Yes, we should be aiming to do that anyway, but shooting in RAW gives you that extra flexibility if things aren't quite right. Whereas shooting with a JPEG, you've got to get it exactly how you want it to look before you press the shutter and make sure it looks spot on, because there's no change in it after. And that's going to help me become a better photographer, hopefully. I also wanted something with a built-in flash because I love that retro disposable camera type look that we used to have. And the reason why I wanted the X100V over some of the other Fujis is because it's the newer one. Even though this is 3 years old, it's got the faster processor, it's got more recipes and more control over the look that you can get from this camera. It's got a built-in ND filter, which is super helpful for when you're filming outside in the sun. And it's also got the folding screen. Now, it doesn't flip out. That'll be an extra bonus, but better than nothing. I should stop some of that noise now. Big case of lenses under the desk, and I just smashed my shin on it, which is always a pleasant sensation in the old mid shin. Okay, so now I'm going to address each one of those points and see if this camera hits the criteria for what we all want. Is it fun? Yes, I had loads of fun when I was in an environment that I felt comfortable in. And I'll kind of come back to that a little bit later. But there's a few quirks that I think could be upgraded. For example, what I take for granted on my Lumix cameras is how good the display screen is, how well the image is represented on that screen. Whereas this, it's not the most inspiring image to look at. It's not until you put the photos onto your computer or your phone where you think, oh, they look all right actually. But I do feel like if it had a better screen, I'd be able to get better results first time, because if it was a more accurate representation of the photo that you're actually gonna get, you know that you're gonna be in the right place. Whereas sometimes the exposure looks different when you get it on your phone or the computer. If this did have the full articulating screen, it'd be so much better, because I found it really difficult to get some more unusual unusual angles because I couldn't really see the screen that well. So does this camera have that authentic film look that everybody is raving about and that everybody is claiming that this has? Now this is the biggest point for me because this is kind of the main reason why I got this camera. So I'm sure you've done the same thing as me where you've been looking at loads of YouTube videos to see what the image looks like on this camera. All of the pro photographer hipsters are making this camera look amazing. But that's the problem because it made me expect incredible results with this instantly. And then when I got it, I was a little bit depressed to figure out that I couldn't get anything anywhere near what those guys were getting. All of those people have way more experience than me. Their lighting and the composition is so much better. They seem to know how to get a great image in many different situations, and they've got a much better understanding of the film recipes and how film works and the color of all that film stuff to make it look more like film. You've kind of got to have a background knowledge of it in order to make it work for you. Don't buy this camera thinking it's going to make your photos look like film, because it won't. When people have been comparing the image that they get from this camera to their actual film cameras, it isn't anywhere near the same. The difference is night and day. Yeah, you know, you can sort of pass it off as it, I guess. But they've even admitted that they've had to go in after and edit the raw files or the JPEGs to get even closer to film because it's just not the same. If you showed someone these images, would the first thing they say be that it looks like it had been shot on a film camera? Probably not. Some of the shots that I got looked a little bit more authentic than others, but what I noticed is that came down to the lighting and the environment. Now if you look at these two photos, this one looks very clean and digital and too sharp, and this one looks a little bit more like film because of the lighting and the contrast. And that's the thing with this, if you know how to capture the perfect photo with the perfect lighting, you're gonna get good results no matter what camera you're gonna use. And if you can't do that, you're gonna get the same standard results on a cheap camera compared to an expensive camera. Your photos are gonna look just the same. So you may as well get something a little bit more affordable and wait until you're ready before you upgrade to something like this. Because then you're gonna have a lot more knowledge as to how to set this camera up for the best results. And you're gonna be a better photographer at that point to make it a worthy upgrade. Now, to give me the best chances of getting that film-like quality, I turned my sharpness all the way down and the grain all the way up, because I want as much of that softness as possible. And the thing is, when you put these photos onto your computer and you're viewing them on a larger screen, they look really nice because you can see all that grain and you can study the photo better. But when you put it on your phone, a smaller screen, it just looks like any other camera similar to what you could take on an iPhone. And that grain almost disappears, you can't see it as well. And most people are viewing my photos, at least, on a phone anyway, because I'm only gonna put them on Instagram and that's it. So they're gonna see this tiny little image that could have been shot on anything. Plus, does just slapping grain on a photo make it look like film? And it's the same with the colours. If you don't understand what types of colours make a film camera look like a film camera, you're never going to get that look. You need to be able to use the camera, understand everything, and dial in the presets to make it look that way. And also, don't think that the recipes are going to look perfect right off the bat, because they're not. Everybody that I know and everybody that has spoken about this camera has dialed in their perfect recipe for them. And as well, they don't just stick to one recipe for everything. There's a big learning curve and there's a lot to be done to set this camera up in the way that you want it to look. There's a lot of work to be done. So if you are a beginner and you don't understand all that stuff and you don't know what type of image you are going for, it's gonna take a long time to get to that place. And you might end up getting frustrated, especially if this is your first camera, because there's a lot to go through that you might not understand. And look, don't get me wrong, you might be happy with the recipes and the way they look right out of camera, but is it worth paying so much for this camera if you don't quite understand it, and if something else similar for a lot less money does a similar thing? The types of photography I like is street photography. I love anything America. I like what a lot of the people are doing on YouTube, where they're in Old Town Las Vegas or in LA and places like that, where the colours are very much pastel-like, and they're filming a lot in golden hour, the neon signs, the retro type look. I love that. We went to this bar in Knott's. It was like American themed sports bar, and I was in my element because there was so much to look at. There was a lot of texture, really nice colours. I had so much fun in that bar, taking loads of pictures. I couldn't put the camera down. I got on poor Danny Boy's nerves. Because of my style of photography, if I've got one, that's where the camera came into its own, because I really knew what I was after and how to get it. Now, I found myself getting much better results when I slightly underexposed every photo, because it gave me a better contrast and also nicer highlights as well. There was more detail in the highlights. I like that kind of moody look. If everything's overexposed, it's just a little bit too clean and nice. Don't like it. I like higher contrast ratios and a little bit of moodiness. What this camera has done, and the way I've been using it, which is shooting on JPEGs, when I look back at the images, I can see how it's gonna help me improve as a photographer, because it's made me realize that I need to slow down a little bit more to get the perfect framing and composition first, and everything else, white balance, exposure, everything, before I take the picture. Because I've gotten into some bad habits with the iPhone, because you take a picture and you look at it and you think, oh, it's not quite right, take another one. I take a bunch, probably about 5 or 6 photos every time I take a picture of something, just so that I can pick the one that looks best afterwards, instead of slowing down and getting the right shot first, and that is the shot. That's what I need to do. So this is gonna train me to do that. It's also going to help me be a little bit more present in the moment as well, which I need to do, because I'm always 900,000 miles an hour. So who is this camera for then? Well, I think, honestly, if you're a beginner and you like the idea of this camera, I don't think you're going to be excited about the results. You've got to put a lot of work in to become a better photographer before you're going to see the benefits of this camera. So I recommend going for something like the X100V, or something like that. It's about half the price. Part of me wishes I'd have gone for that too, but then you've got to think it doesn't have the screen, and the processor might be a little bit slower. The menu system might not be as good. I've not tried it, so I can't say, but this is obviously the newer version. So practice on something a little bit more affordable. Then when you do upgrade, you're going to appreciate that upgrade much more. It's like playing guitar. You're not going to start on the most expensive guitar you can buy. You're going to start on a cheapy one to begin with, get used to it, and then slowly upgrade. What's most important to take away from this is you and developing your skill, not the camera. Yes, this camera has some great functions and features built in, like the film emulations. I made this video to make you aware that the film emulations aren't as great as they are shown on YouTube. They're not mind-blowingly the same as film cameras. It's just not. They're all right. They're good. They look okay. Do they look like film as much as everyone says they do? Not really. Is it close enough? Yes. Close enough. For me. Is it close enough for you? Dunno. If you are a hardcore film fan and you want something digital, should you get this? I don't know. If you want to make your photos really look like film, you could shoot on any digital camera and in RAW, edit them to make them look much more like film. You're probably going to get better results that way. So you're probably all wondering, what am I going to do? Am I going to keep it or am I going to send it back? Honestly, I'm keeping it. I actually really enjoy using this camera for all the reasons that I've mentioned. I'm looking forward to getting better with this camera and seeing what else I can do with it and improving my skills. Now, if you're still not quite sure what to do, this isn't the only camera that has something like the recipes built into it, because the camera that I talk about in this video has something very similar and it works extremely well. Plus, it has a lot more newer, more upgraded features built into it as well. So I highly recommend checking this video out and let me know what you think.